Sometimes the greatest miracles happen when all hope seems lost, when silence becomes our only companion, and we think heaven has turned away. But it's often in that silence that the voice of God whispers the loudest. This is the story of Elias Ward, a blind man who had given up on faith, until one day the wind itself began to speak. What happened next would change not only his eyes, but his soul forever. The town of Millstone was small, too small to be on most maps. It sat quietly on the edge of a river that had long forgotten its name, a place where time seemed to breathe slower, and the sky always looked a little faded, as though heaven itself was tired. Elias Ward had lived there for 71 years. Once he had been a man of the pulpit, a pastor, a teacher of faith, a voice that once echoed through the little white church at the town's heart. But that was decades ago, before the silence came, before he lost his sight. He still remembered the day it happened, a bright morning that turned dark far too quickly. One moment, sunlight poured through the chapel's stained glass windows, dancing across the pews in colors of crimson and gold. The next, the world went black, a darkness not of the eyes alone, but of the soul. Doctors told him it was a vascular failure. Something in his eyes had simply stopped working. They said it was irreversible. But Elias didn't believe in irreversible, not then. He prayed, he fasted, he anointed his eyelids with oil every night, whispering scriptures through trembling lips. "Lord, you opened the eyes of the blind. Do it again." But the heavens stayed silent. Days became months, and months became years. His faith, once a roaring fire, had dimmed into a flickering ember, faint and fragile. He no longer stood at the pulpit. He no longer sang hymns. He had told people all his life that God still speaks, but when he needed to hear that voice the most, all he found was silence. Now, in the winter of his years, Elias lived in a small cabin by the river. His only companion was a golden retriever named Solomon, a gentle, loyal creature who guided him through the simple routine of his days. Every morning, Elias would walk along the riverside path, leaning on his cane, feeling the soft earth beneath his steps. He couldn't see the sunrise anymore, but he said he could still feel it, the warmth of it on his face, the way the wind carried its light. "If I close my eyes," he often murmured, "it's like I never lost it." The neighbors rarely saw him. Some said the old pastor had lost his faith. Others said he had gone mad, talking to the wind. But Elias didn't mind. In the quiet, there was peace, and though he wouldn't admit it, there was still a tiny spark of hope that refused to die. One cold afternoon, as the sun bent low over the river, Elias paused near an old wooden bench. The dog sat beside him, breathing softly, its head resting against his leg. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of rain and the faint sound of church bells from somewhere far away, the kind of sound that reached not just the ear, but the heart. And for a brief moment, Elias felt watched, not by people, but by something unseen. A warmth pressed against his chest, faint but real, like a memory trying to break through the years of silence. He lifted his face toward the wind.
Lord, if you're still here, I'm still listening. But the breeze only sighed through the trees. He smiled sadly. That's all right, he said softly. I understand. He turned to leave, but just as he took his first step, the dog gave a low growl. Its body stiffened. Elias froze. What is it, boy? The wind changed again, not cold, but strangely warm, carrying with it a faint hum. It wasn't the rustle of leaves, nor the river's murmur. It was something else, something alive.
And then, for the first time in 20 years, Elias heard a voice, not outside him, but within. Elias. He staggered. The voice wasn't human, yet it was the most human sound he'd ever known. It carried both strength and gentleness, as if mercy itself had spoken. Do not fear the silence, the voice said. I was in it all along. Elias fell to his knees, trembling. Tears streamed down his weathered face. Lord, is it you? But before another word could form, the light came. A warmth, unlike any sunlight he'd ever known, flooded his body. His closed eyes began to burn, not with pain, but with glory. He gasped. For a moment, just a moment, he saw it. The river blazing with gold, the trees shimmering with life. And standing before him, not of flesh, but of light, was a figure whose presence silenced all doubt. Elias wanted to speak, but the figure raised a hand. You asked me to open your eyes. Now I will open your vision. And as the wind swirled around him, the old man's darkness was no more.
The story is read by Messianic TV channel. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.
Elias did not know how long he knelt there by the river. The golden retriever, Solomon, pressed against him, silent and still, as though even the creature understood the weight of what was happening. The voice lingered, gentle but vast, echoing through the corners of his soul. Elias, the years you called silence were not absence. I was there, in every breath, in every step you thought was lost. Tears streamed freely down his face. His heart pounded with both awe and disbelief. Why now, he whispered, after all these years, why speak to me now? The wind carried no answer, but the light before him flickered softly, almost like a smile. Then it faded, and with it the warmth in his chest began to settle into peace. When Elias finally opened his eyes again, he gasped. He could see. The river shimmered like molten gold. The trees swayed in slow reverence. Even the smallest ripple in the water seemed alive with purpose. But more than that, he saw what others could not. Behind the veil of the visible world, there were traces of glory, radiant threads woven into everything, like whispers of heaven hiding in the mundane.
And when he looked at Solomon, his faithful dog, he didn't just see fur and flesh. He saw light pulsing around him, pure, loyal, unwavering. The world has not changed, Elias, said the voice once more. Only your eyes have. Then all was still again. That night Elias returned home in silence. His mind raced with wonder and fear. He kept the lights off, afraid that if he blinked, the miracle would vanish. He walked to the small wooden cross above his fireplace, the one he had carved long ago when his faith was still young. For the first time in decades, he saw it clearly: the grain of the wood, the cracks of time, the faint burn marks of old candle smoke.
He fell to his knees. "Forgive me, Lord, I doubted you." But the spirit within him whispered, "You doubted yourself, not me." He sat there for hours between tears, laughter, and awe, until the moonlight crept through the window, soft and silver, painting his wrinkled hands in light. Days passed. Elias didn't tell anyone what had happened. He feared they'd call it madness, a hallucination from an old man desperate for meaning.
But the peace in his heart was undeniable. Every breath, every moment felt touched by unseen hands. Even the ordinary sounds, rustling leaves, flowing water, bird song, seemed like parts of a great conversation he was only beginning to understand. Then one morning, there came a knock on his door. When he opened it, a young woman stood there, mid-30s, dressed in plain clothes, a silver cross hanging around her neck. Her eyes, clear as dawn, seemed to look through him, not at him. "Pastor Ward?" she asked softly.
He hesitated. "I haven't been called that in a long time." "My name's Miriam," she said. I believe God sent me here." Elias frowned, uncertain whether to laugh or cry. "Did he tell you that himself?" She nodded. "Last night, in prayer, he said, 'Go to the river. The one who is blind will show you the way.'" Elias gripped the doorframe. The same warmth he'd felt that day by the river returned. He said, "Come in," quietly.
Over tea, Miriam shared her story. She had been a missionary nurse, traveling between small towns to help the sick and the poor. But lately she'd been plagued by dreams, visions of a river glowing with gold, and the man standing at its edge calling her name. "I thought it was nonsense," she said, "but when I woke up this morning, my Bible was open to John 9, the man born blind, and I knew." Elias listened, his heart pounding. The words rose in him, unbidden but certain. "It's beginning again." Miriam looked at him. "What do you mean?"
He turned to the window, where the wind stirred the curtains. "Revival," he said softly, "but not of churches or crowds, of hearts. God is awakening those who thought they were forgotten." And as he spoke, something stirred in the room, a holy presence, warm and weighty. The air shimmered faintly. Miriam began to weep, though she didn't know why. Elias stood, lifted his hand, and whispered, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon us." A light filled the room, gentle yet powerful, and Miriam fell to her knees, trembling. When it faded, her face was radiant. "He's here," she said. "He's always been," Elias replied. News began to spread, though no one knew exactly how. People started coming to Elias's small home by the river. A young man crippled by despair, a mother with a dying child, a soldier haunted by war. He didn't advertise, didn't preach, he simply listened. And when he prayed, things changed. The sick recovered, the broken found peace. But more than miracles, hearts were awakened. People left his house not just healed, but transformed. And Elias, the blind man who once doubted, became the vessel of sight for others. Still he knew this was not about him. Every night he walked back to the riverside, where it had all begun. He would kneel, close his eyes, and whisper, "Not my will, but yours." And always the wind would answer, warm, living, carrying whispers from beyond. Years later, when Elias finally passed from this world, they said the river turned gold again. Some claimed it was sunset. Others said it was a trick of the light. But Miriam, now older, her hair touched with silver, stood at the same riverside, her hands clasped in prayer. She felt the wind move through the trees, soft as breath, and she smiled. "You kept your promise," she whispered. And somewhere beyond the veil, Elias heard. He wasn't gone, only home. The voice that once called his name spoke again. "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have walked by faith, and now you see by glory." The wind swirled one last time, warm, golden, eternal, and Millstone, the small, forgotten town by the river, was no longer forgotten at all. For the Spirit still moved there, and every now and then, when the sun dipped low and the wind turned golden, some swore they could see a man walking by the river, an old man smiling, his faithful dog by his side, and the world, for just a moment, shimmered again. In every life, there comes a moment when heaven whispers our name. For Elias Ward, it came as a simple breathe, a touch of the divine, disguised as the wind. From darkness to light, from silence to song, he discovered that faith was never lost. It had only been waiting to be seen again. Maybe you've been walking through your own darkness, wondering if God still remembers your name. The truth is, he never forgot. The same wind that touched Elias still moves today, still heals, still calls. Listen, and you may feel it too.